Yeah. I've been wanting to do this for a while. I like Candice. I know Candice Owens. I don't know Nick Fuentes. Other than I have people in the comments. I've had about five different people just comment, "You look like Nick Fuentes." Had no idea of who he was, what he was, until like really recently. He seems to have popped up really recently. The Hodge twins. That This is really the first time I'm going to see him because I have seen him a clip of him on the Hodge twins talking about Charlie Kirk and why he don't like Charlie Kirk, or why there's a bit of beef between them. But um, really, this would be my first thing of him. Really, I know Candice Owens. I like Candice Owens, and if you want a good laugh, if well, I think everyone knows by now. But look up Candice Owens calling the French Prime Minister's wife a man, and probably there's a very good chance that she is. But yeah, this is Candice Owens versus Nick Fuentes on race. Let's go.
So you don't think that there's group differences on average between the
I
races?
think, just to be clear, I think there would be group differences if you took in, like we were talking about, an American versus somebody who graduates college in Europe. There'd be tremendous differences. I
Not
truly,
tremendous, but yeah, there
yeah,
would be
there'd be
slight
differences.
differences,
Yeah.
but you don't
So
think
I
that
think
racially there's differences between races?
I think, yeah, because we have huge differences culturally. So going to your point of
Mm,
saying I don't want to live in a black neighborhood, well, neither does LeBron James when he gets money, right?
right.
And there's a reason for that
Mhm.
because there is something that's happening culturally in Black America that's been going on for a very long time. But that thing, I would argue, didn't exist in.
What about in Africa and Haiti? I mean, they're killing and eat each other in Africa and Haiti. Everywhere where they are, you have these problems.
Yeah, I'd like to look into, and I'm pleading ignorant, but I've heard some things about what happened in Haiti and what the Clinton Foundation did there. So I think I'd have to look more into the
Mm.
history of Haiti to be able to push back on that at all. I don't think I agree with that.
What about all of Africa then? There's not one country in sub-Saharan Africa that's successful. Not one. They're all least developed countries. They're all
Yeah.
failed states.
This kind of reminds me,
I actually don't think that's true. I watched Jordan Peterson. I've said it before. I can't remember the woman's name, but she's an African woman. There's like three countries in Africa. I'm sure she said three, nearly four, although the interview was a couple of years ago. I'd like to know how them countries is getting on. But basically, this woman was saying that these countries basically took a look at themselves and said, why are we so messed up compared to Europe and that? And they went to the best places in the world is places that have stemmed from the British Empire. Anywhere the British Empire is compared, like the example she gives is Hong Kong to China. Hong Kong accepted the British Empire and they are way more successful than them. And but she said what there was three African countries, or maybe four, that basically looked and said, what was it that the British Empire or that England at that time got right, and basically pulled it down to laws. And there's a lot. I agree. We have a heavy African. There's loads of Africans here. I had an African teacher for a course I did, but he said, like for example, she's 100% right. It bases it on the at the core of a good society is laws, the laws that you picked, and that's the thing that England and the British Empire did get right was the laws. And she's right because the African teacher, he'd been here for years. Like he come here when he was like 20, he's like 60 or something now. But he said when he come to England, he didn't understand that to cut someone's hands off for stealing was wrong. He's like, in this country, no matter what you get accused of, you get to go to trial and get to plead your case, no matter how horrendous your thing. He's like, the concept of that doesn't exist in Africa. He's like that, and he said that's why Britain is the best country in the world. But you can apply that to all the countries that kind of stemmed off of that initial push across the world, like America and Canada and countries that I know America separated, but there's still a fundamental core set of laws and that have always been in America. So even if you did it your own like way without kind of copying the UK, it's still, the success was built off of the laws. That's basically what it is. Um, but yeah, this woman was like, there are countries in Africa that are starting to wake up and starting to actually put in place a law, court systems, and that them countries are actually doing better than some European countries. Like they are actually climbing the world's ladder, where, like he said, no country in Africa is successful like that. But yeah, look it up. Just, I can't remember the woman's name, but if you put up Jordan Peterson, African woman, you'll see it.
We could kind of flesh out this conversation together, and I'm not perhaps ready to have it fully, but I do remember going back to Dave Smith where he was conceding a point on, well, all of these other Middle Eastern countries, no, you wouldn't want to live there. You'd want to live in Israel. In my mind, I'm going, well, because you just keep bombing the crap out of them if they ever try to get ahead. I remember watching this clip of him saying that, going, why don't these countries get ahead? And kind of going back in my mind to the Gaddafi speech where he was speaking essentially about, here's what we got to do in Libya to get ahead. Here's what we're going to do with the dollar, and we're going to be progressive and this and that. And they killed him. And then what happened to those Libyan refugees? Suddenly they're now pouring into, just like he said was going to happen, that they were now pouring into the European continent, and Europeans are complaining, who are these people? And so the question is, are we allowing, because I'm like, Africa's a pretty rich country. Like, why aren't
Yeah.
Africans controlling the diamond trade? Who's taking all of the diamonds so that they can't control the diamond trade? And how long have these people been doing that, being essentially culture vultures? That's kind of the journey that I've been on now in terms of really trying to go back and look into history to see what's happened.
Mm-hmm.
And I never trust.
But then, how can Candice then? She goes against the Black Lives Matter and what black people say that it's white. How can she say to black people in America now that she is that less that their situation isn't a result of white people doing something, when you are saying the reason that Africa is all messed up and the reason Libya is messed up is because, well, it wasn't Israel, it was America. I know you're going to say Israel asked America, but it was America that killed Gaddafi, not Israel. But how can Candice then still stand on her thing of telling the black Americans to, the white man's not holding you back. They haven't took everything off of you. When you're saying Africa can't stand on its own, when everyone keeps interfering in their thing. So it's not Africa's fault, it's everyone else's fault for interfering in it. It's like, that is literally what black people say. We can't get ahead because white people are holding us back and have all the resources and the money. You can no longer stand on that position no more, Candice. Because if you say Africa's like that is because of other people and not a fundamental problem of what's going on in Africa, you can't say that to the black Americans.
Myself when I have a perspective now, because I realize how much of my opinions and beliefs were shaped by the public school system.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't think you're right. I think that there has been a very sophisticated effort to, just like you would say now, in terms of people that are intentionally attacking Anglo-Saxons. I'm just learning about that there were these books that were written to, we must genocide the Anglo-Saxons, that were going on for a lot longer than I realized. History didn't begin with World War II, but I think it would take a lot of time to kind of unpack that.
Yeah.
Like, are we stopping people from getting ahead just because, I don't know.
That just sounds, I mean, being honest with you, that just sounds to me like a left-wing argument when they say, why don't these countries get ahead? Colonialism. You're a colonizer. It's like, okay, but when we got there, they had no development. When we got to Africa, they had no technological development,
So you
no
think
recorded
that
history.
even if we weren't at war, and sure, you could say that you think that's a leftist argument. I would only push back on that because I've learned so much about just like recent history that I didn't know. But you think that the Middle East, like, if we had done nothing in terms of the Middle East, that they would just be savages and just be like, America didn't do anything it doesn't set anything backwards, and you're just like bombing a place.
Yeah, kind of. I think that we did set them back because when they don't have political order, it prevents development and investment and things like that. But, again, when you look at the antecedents of all these, the history didn't start, like you said, with World War II in the 20th century. There's a reason that European civilization created this enormous gap between them and everybody else. And I don't think it was that it was white supremacy or it was unfair or something like that. I think it's because Europeans are smarter.
I don't think that. Um, because ultimately we are at the moment, but you got to understand that for a long time, the Middle East was the 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 hub of everything new. The guitar comes from there, coffee comes from there. Um, African slaves came from from Arabs. At one point in the world, Europe wasn't the smartest people in the world. And actually, you could argue that we was in a dark age during the time. Like, there's some argument around the dark age of, was it a dark age because there was no structure in Europe, so nothing was recorded, and it was just basically humans were savages, or was it when they adjusted the calendars to the calendar that we have now? We lost 500 years. I've seen an argument for that too. So that the dark age in Europe may not necessarily, they may have just called it that because it, do you know what I mean? The switching of the calendars made it 500 years different. But at one point, now this is going to sound incredibly racist. Or no, not as racist as saying that Europeans are just fundamentally smarter. I don't think that's true. Um, but 100% in the Middle East and the Muslim countries, they at one point was at the cutting edge of everything, and then they it became okay to marry your first cousin, which that sent the Middle East way back in time to women wearing burqas and all of this and this very medieval Sharia law kind of ideology can literally be, you can pin the backtracking of is uh the Middle East and these areas that were at one point, pretty much everything was invented by them, um like way before Europe. But like, and it's true, it was tested in our country that 75% of Muslims in the UK are inbred, and it's because the Prophet Muhammad. I'm sure it's the Prophet Muhammad, but it said it's okay to marry your first cousin. We've actually passed a law in our country that you can marry your first cousin. There is no way in any shape or form anyone can convince me that that is not for one specific group of people, and it's Muslims. No one in the West wants to marry their first cousin. We know it's weird. Why would the UK change that when no one has ever said, I really need to marry my first cousin in the UK? It's because we have a lot of Muslims and they think it's okay. We know, especially our country, look at our royal family. People say, oh, well, yeah, you criticize Muslims for marrying their first cousins and being inbred, but the royal family does it. And it's like, yeah, it went really bad there too. Like, they are weirdos. Like, and also, the royal family even learn over time that you cannot keep the same genetics pool, and they do. They have things called commoners. Like Kate Middleton was classed as a commoner. She's nowhere near a commoner. Like, nowhere near a commoner. But she is compared to them. But it's just differentiating that bloodline because they learn over years that if you have too much of the same bloodline, it turns you, backwards. I would actually say more than um, Europe influence, that had an effect on the Middle East and what happened. Also, she said about Israel. Israel took out Gaddafi. Israel didn't take out Gaddafi. America did. And I know people will say that Israel asked them, but if Israel asked you to jump off a bridge, would you do it? Like, you don't have to do it. And yeah, I'm not I'm a guess what you'd call a victim blamer. I think the most healthy way that anything that happens to you on the micro or macro level, the healthiest way to look at it, no matter if, there is no denying that there is no way you are at fault. Like, say if I'm walking down the road and someone just jumps out of a bush and stabs me, no one's gonna hold anything against me. But the healthiest way that I can recover from that is to say, how can I avoid that from happening? Where did I go wrong? And it may just be something like, um, I need to be more aware. Don't walk with a hood on so I can see all around me. Do you know what I mean? Even though it is completely that person's fault for why they jumped out the bush and stabbed me, the healthiest way is to say, how can we change? Like, no matter what someone does to you, the best way is to look in it. And I'm not one for saying that the reason that these, because if you, like, people say it like with India, and that the reason these countries is, and Africa is, the reason they're messed up is because the British Empire conquered them. The British Empire conquered everywhere. A lot of the places that the British Empire conquered are by far outdoing us on the financial world scale. So the fact that we invaded them and we conquered them and we owned them has no effect in the modern day to what that country, to the fact that they are even now better than us in a position. I think even Ireland is would be a great example, even though that was not technically, I mean, it's not technically owned British territory ever, I don't think. Northern Ireland, but not Ireland. But yeah, to say that the reason why Africa is in the place that it's in is because of um, America or Israel or Europe's intervention over there, you would have to still concede to the point that Europe is far superior to you, and Europeans are far superior, because Africa can't do that to us. No outside influence can just collapse the whole of Europe, because we are financially superior. Not, again, not necessarily in China and whatever, but that's the thing. It's like to say, no matter how much you bomb, think of what Germany did here. I think it's Coventry. Coventry in our country was like 100 miles down the road or something like that. The Germans literally blew it up the map. They blew Coventry up so much. They blew our country up so much. There's a bridge near me that was built by the Romans. It had to be rebuilt because the Germans. I live right on the Thames, which is one of the few places they could bomb. Everyone turned their lights out when it got dark, so they couldn't see when they was coming over land. The only way the Germans could find out when they was actually coming into England was to follow the moonlight off the Thames. So things down the Thames got bombed. Uh, a bridge near me got bombed. This country got blown into oblivion. We are not sitting there saying that, oh, it's Germany. Germany's the reason that Ireland's doing better than us, and America's doing better than us. And there's an infinite number of reasons why Britain is failing and has been for years. Now, I'm not saying as well that the outside influence doesn't play any factor at all, but to say that Africa is in the state is in now and has always been is because of European um, intervention. Yeah, it's I don't know how you can I don't know how you can make that argument, because if you had a good system and a good, no matter how much bombing you do, it's not going to destroy the place, because at the fundamental core, there's still something you can rebuild on. That's the trouble. There's no fundamental law, like that African woman said. But there are a handful of countries in Africa that are adopting things that the British Empire told them years ago, but they decided to go against, which is laws, a court system, and then a country builds from that. So yeah, well, that was a lot for a 4 minute video. That was a lot. Yeah, that was yeah, I don't agree with Nick Fuentes that Europeans are just smarter either. You could argue that there's more of a necessity in Europe to. I think Patrice O'Neill made that argument that there's a reason that Europe is more inventive than the rest of the world is because it had to. Like, look what again another country that conquered us was the Vikings and the Norwegians. But fundamentally, they left because they couldn't grow things where they lived, which forced them out of their home. And I know in Africa they can't grow things, but they can eat. There's things around they eat. Like when you live in like the mountains of Norway, it's a bit harder to come across food. Whereas when they come to England and see that England has a good um, weather system to grow, that's what the Vikings wanted, was England's thing. So you can make the argument that maybe Europeans, because of the rougher terrain of parts of the place where we're from, it will force you to be more creative and come up with things, whereas someone in Africa wouldn't have to. Like for example, building houses and things like that. If you live in Europe, you got no choice but to build a house, because if when winter comes, you're gonna die. Africa, you don't really need to. You just lie down at night, go to sleep. Like, why would you need a house? It's beautiful. Like Jim Morrison said in LA. Jim Morrison didn't have a house for years. He just slept on a roof. Like, he lived in LA. What do you need a house for? It's just nice and warm. But yeah, yeah. Let me know your thoughts, and yeah, let me know your thoughts. Sweet.